All right, people, let's have a look at this roll between Andreas and Fab. We'll look at this from Andreas's point of view on top here. You can see we're in switch space side control. We're looking to hand fight, potentially trying to defeat these frames of Fab's, but we get off balanced and end up defending a front head type situation. So if we go back to this switch-based side control position, the main reason that we're doing this is so that we can use our left hand to pick up the tricep and start pulling his elbow across the middle or up high enough so that we can get our left hip up underneath the armpit there. And using our left foot on the ground a little bit higher up will help us give some drive when we use our foot to push off the ground there to try and pick up that elbow. But if we can't get the elbow up away from the body, then we could use our hand to try and get generally thumb behind the wrist there and trying to push Fab's hands towards his chest. So at least we can stuff his hands on the inside of this, in between our bodies, so that we can start collapsing their frames to their chest there. But what happens here is pretty common, and that is we start trying to deal with the frames and we're using our left hand. We're kind of leaning back to do that. And you can see that when we start to lean back, our top shoulder starts to move behind our bottom shoulder, which means that we're in much more danger of being rolled over and off balance in a position like this. And the last thing I'll point out in this side control position is whenever we are hand fighting here against our partner's frames, we want to make very small circles. You can see that Andreas is trying to circle his left hand to a more offensive position to grip fight, and we end up doing this big kind of windmill, and we start kind of leaning backwards here, and that's what allows our partner to off-balance us. And then we start defending this front head position, and Andreas does a good job of rolling through before the leg can get over the back. So anytime you are defending against a front head, generally just rolling through is a pretty good idea. And now we're kind of playing this guard. We're in this little no man's land here, kind of in between a seated guard and a supine guard. This is a very awkward spot to be, so just try and pick one or the other, whether we want our back flat on the mat or we want to try and play a seated guard. And this is a good seated guard position here. So we've got our hand on the mat behind us, we've got our foot in front of us so that we can scoot forwards and backwards, and we can use our feet to start disrupting our partner's balance, but not like this. You can see that when we start reaching for our partner's legs here, we're exposing that space between our knees and our shoulders, and Fab is able to switch his base and end up in top half guard here with this kind of switch base side control. So whenever we're playing a position like this, when we're on our back, we want to try and make a very clear distinction in our head between whether we're playing a seated guard, where we're trying to lean far forwards of our hips and use our hands to hand fight. We can start getting our feet in between our partner's ankles and use our hand fighting or pushing on the knees to off balance our partner so that we can do things like wrestle up or enter shin on shin guards to single X, but kind of reaching to pull ourselves in towards like a half guard knee shield is a bit of a dicey thing to do, particularly when we start extending our knees past the line of our hips there, because often we'll end up in this spot where it's difficult for us to protect that space between our knees and our shoulders, and our partner's able to switch their base and get into this kind of switch base side control type spot. So Andreas does a really good job at off balancing his partner and then getting back to this turtle type situation, which probably gives Andreas a few more options in terms of standing up and escaping and things like that. If we go back to this side control position here, a good thing, this reverse half guard, switch base half guard type position here. So really good job off balancing by Andreas. And the reason why we started to be able to off balance our partner is because we've gotten up on this bottom elbow, and that is helping us build some height, and that generally will help us create some off balances. So trying to off balance our partner is always a good thing to do. And if we are unsure about what's happening in a scramble, a good thing to do is try and win the hip height battle, which we have already won, and the head height battle, which we are yet to win. So if at all possible, we can get up on our hand instead of our elbow, then that would be a good thing to do. Another thing that we could look to do from this position here is try and use our left foot as a butterfly hook inside Fab's knee there. And then that way we have a little bit more defensive options. You know, we can start using our butterfly hook to elevate and start freeing our bottom knee. We can try and use our hand to pop this knee of Fab's in between our legs so that we can start shifting onto our left hip and attacking the back. All those things would be good. But when we try this off balance and it doesn't quite work here, maybe this is a good time to start putting our left foot in as a butterfly hook, because it's pretty predictable that Fab is going to try and push back in towards us here. And if we had that left foot in as a butterfly hook, that would give us a few more options, playing what is essentially like an octopus type position where we're kind of in this reverse half guard, where we don't have an underhook on this far side of the body, but this left arm being behind the back is similar to what an underhook would do. But when we can't get to the butterfly hook, at least we've got our bottom knee out and we're kind of defending this turtle position. Now, looking for this Kosoto hook on the leg can be a good idea when our partner has double unders, a little bit less effective when our partner has this kind of reverse seatbelt type position here, and particularly when they've started Kosoto hooking our foot. I would say most of the time that you're defending from turtle and somebody starts to Kosoto that leg, means a back take is pretty likely to occur. So just trying to address that Kosoto hook as soon as possible would be good, and we could potentially use our right foot to move the inside of Fab's knee out so that we could free ourselves from that Kosoto hook. And now we are defending against the seatbelt. We do a really good job at turtling up, and then we're in this kind of reverse seatbelt position, attacking the double unders. But this is something that is very well done by Andreas here, and it's a good thing for a beginner to think about here is our partner has a seatbelt, and we're vulnerable to this space being opened up when they start pressing off the ground with their feet and lifting our chest up away from our knees there. So just trying to stay in as tight a ball as possible will make it very hard for your partner to get hooks in straight away. You can see Andreas has got those knees to his chest and he's able to start getting his hips out. Now, we know that the underhook of Fab is on the bottom here, which means our top shoulder is essentially free. So if possible, it would be ideal to scoot our right hip forward with our hips facing up towards the roof and get our left elbow to the mat, where we could potentially start to frame against our partner's hips and prevent our partner from following us too effectively here. And now we are defending against turtle. Looks like Fab is using kind of double under grips here. And we're in a nice tight ball, but we need to be hand fighting here, trying to get our partner's hands away from being connected around our body there, where it's kind of just a matter of time before we end up having our back taken. So hand fighting when you're in turtle is a good thing to think about, just trying to disconnect our partner's hands there. And we end up giving up the mount in defense of the back, which is probably not a bad thing to do. But here, once we start kipping and rotating our hips over, we're in a little bit of trouble. So whenever we're in mount, we want to keep our elbow on the same side of our partner's body. If we let that elbow go across the center line of our body, that makes our partner's back takes and gift wrap, arm triangles, arm bars, pretty much everything is easier when that elbow goes across the middle. So we want to try and avoid putting our elbow across the middle as much as possible. And now our partner has two hooks in, and just a second ago they have this arm over the top, which means they are vulnerable to being shaken off the top in this direction. So if we put our head down and our butt up, there's a good chance that we can start moving our partner forwards, and their hips might slide further up near our shoulders there. And then whichever hook is in the shallowest, we could try and kick that hook free. But Fab does a good job of correcting to an underhook on the left side and most likely trying to power half here and fall towards the side of his underhook. So Andreas has done a good job at clearing a hook with the hand, but because it's on the same side as the underhook of Fab's here, it means that it's most likely going to get put back in. And this shoulder being controlled means that our turtling rotation is going to be very hard to do. So if the rotation over this direction is hard to do, that means when we're defending the back, particularly when our partner doesn't have an underhook on the bottom, it is usually a good idea to start shifting our shoulders to the mat. So starting with the back of the head, getting that to the mat, starting to wiggle our shoulders out in this direction, so that we can use our right hip to try and open up their bottom hook and potentially escape from this back attack. But here we're kind of doing a good job at staying in a nice tight ball here, but eventually that top hook comes in and now our arm is getting isolated and this leg gets thrown over the face. Our arm's pretty extended here and kind of gets caught on the way out. So a main thing there would be just trying to defend from mount a little bit more slowly there rather than trying to bridge all the way and get out. So we're playing some guard here, we're scooting, we're playing the seated guard, we start reaching in between the legs again, and we have our feet on the inside position when we're forced to our back, which eventually is going to result in probably our knees being pinched together or push to one side or the other. So this feet on the inside, it's kind of like a butterfly guard, but because our back is flat on the mat, it's much harder for us to be offensive from that position. So if we go back to this spot all the way back here, when we're playing this seated guard position, we get pushed backwards. Now, we want to avoid being stuck in this no man's land where our shoulders are behind our hips. So in a position like this, if we can't get all the way back to an offensive seated guard, we might want to consider putting our back flat on the mat and trying to bring our feet to the outside position where we have a better chance of retaining our guard for longer. Whereas when we start fishing our feet in the middle of our partner's legs and we're kind of forced into this elbow up position, which is kind of an awkward spot to play from, then we end up having to do these less than ideal feet configurations for playing an offensive guard. We get stuck flat on our back with the potential for our knees to get put together. So ideally, we would like to be pushing our partner's upper body weight, maybe trying to get our back up off the mat and trying to play more like a traditional butterfly guard. But this spot here is pretty hard to defend. So Andreas is using that top shin to free his bottom leg. We actually got to a really good De La Riva type position there. But in this situation, our feet are past the line of our partner's body, so we can't really use them to frame our partner away. And we're spending a little bit too long holding on to our partner while we're in this supine position. And by the time we try and get our foot back in front of our partner, it's a little bit harder because we're being crowded in this headquarters type position. So a good thing to think about in a spot like this, where Fab starts passing around, is we have our right shin across the hips right now, which isn't the outside position, right? We want our left knee to be in front of the shoulder ideally, so that we can keep a little bit of space between his shoulders and our shoulders. And then we can use that left knee in front of the chest to create enough space to bring our bottom foot to the outside where we can threaten close guard or even move to close guard. The other thing that we could think about is the position of this left hand. If it's on the far shoulder, it's not bad, but if we use our hand on the side of the neck here to push our partner's head away from us, then they won't be in this kind of crossbody position, and we'll be able to turn onto our right hip a little bit more, getting more of our back off the mat and giving us more space to move backwards into using this right shin across the hip. So we always want to try and be on our hip when we are trying to regain an open guard position, so that if we're flat on our back here, you can see our knees are pointing up and this left knee is no longer in front of the chest anymore. So good job getting it back in front of the chest here. And now we've done a good job of getting this right foot to the outside position. Our left foot is in a good defensive position on the outside of our partner's body. So this is a very good place to start playing a guard from. And some options for Andreas here on the bottom are all going to involve using our right hand to grab the ankle of Fab. So trying to wrap our hand around the Achilles grip there so that we can start using our shin behind the back of the knee to turn our partner's knee towards the screen left there. And that way their hips and chest will rotate in this direction. We can start exposing the back and things like that. The other thing that it can allow us to do is if Fab does push that left foot back in between our legs, like I think he's actually just does right here, then if we can use this right foot in front of our partner's hips here, then whilst we have our right hand controlling the ankle, we'll be able to perform a tripod sweep by using our right foot to push the hips backwards and our left foot behind the back of the knee. And tripod sweeps are not to be underrated. They're extremely effective here, but you can see that we're kind of just stuck. It's a very common thing when you're beginning, and Andre has gotten a lot better since the filming of this. It's probably 18 months ago or so, but we really feel like we want to hold on to something when we are beginning. And when we're being defensive, we pretty much want to push everything away until we're happy with our grips, and then we can start pulling everything in. So this instinct to kind of hold on with our hands and pinch our knees together is pretty common here, but you can see that Fab's able to start wearing us out in this headquarters position, pinning our back flat to the mat and starting to deal with our frames. Now Fab's being quite nice during this roll, but still it's a difficult position for us to recover from, and Andreas is doing as best he can using that left hand to start framing, and we want to get that right foot back in front. And now unfortunately we get punished for doing what is pretty much the correct movement here by Fab dropping back onto this ankle lock and turning. I think he even finishes at one hand here. So when our partner sits back on an ankle lock, what we would like to think about is trying to avoid our partner controlling our hips with their legs. So they have a good bite, a good Achilles grip on our ankle there. If we can use our right hand to get this foot off the hip, then we should be able to sit forwards and start trying to stand up on that right leg. And if our partner is rotating in like they are in this position, then rotating quickly is a good idea so that they don't get kind of stuck or they don't keep us stuck in a belly down orientation. And our left foot could come into play here, maybe pummeling in between the legs here or trying to back heel and separate the bite that Fab has with his knees here. But it's going to be pretty difficult to stop. And you can see again that that right foot on the hip is giving Fab something to bridge off of and adding a lot more power to the Achilles grip. And so now starting again in side control. And we've gone straight to this switch base, which doesn't need to be the case. We could keep our chest flat and try and collapse our partner's forearms in between their chest there, but let's have a look at these little grip fighting patterns that are happening here. And the main thing that I'm thinking about for Andreas is trying to avoid making big circles with our hands when we are looking to grip fight here. And when we go for this kind of reverse collar tie, it can be a good way of controlling our partner's head. But probably what would be better is just a good old-fashioned regular crossface where we come underneath the head. And that way we can start rotating our partner's chin away from us, which will aid us in our ability to try and get their shoulders back to the mat here. So I would just avoid switching our base too much. And then if we do switch our base, we want to avoid getting our top shoulder past our bottom shoulder. So again, here, this is kind of that awkward no man's land where we're kind of up on our elbow. So just try and avoid these positions when you're rolling and think about either playing a committed seated guard where we have our shoulders forwards of our hips or a supine guard where we're all the way on our back there. But now this is a little bit better with our off balancing here, but still we could have our shoulders further of our hips. A good job trying to hand fight here. You can see that when we tuck one foot back like this, it leaves us in a very awkward spot where it's difficult for us to wrestle up. So if we are going to throw our feet behind us, we can try and throw both our feet behind us to give us a better chance of wrestling up. And then we want to avoid keeping our feet on the floor and avoid inside position when we are on our back like this so that we can get a little bit more offensive from a seated guard position. And then now we were just kind of reaching in between the legs again. And that results in another guard pass because our knees were coming away from our elbows. I think that is the end of the round here. So hopefully that was helpful. I guess the main takeaways for this would be trying to really decide in your head whether you're playing a seated guard, you're trying to sit all the way forward so that you can hand fight and off balance with your feet effectively, or if you are under pressure and you feel like you need to retain your guard, trying to go all the way back to a supine guard where you can then be a little bit more defensively minded with the outside position of your feet first, and then you can make a grip. So hopefully this was helpful, and I will catch you guys next time.